It is called The President's Shadow. A man in a dark suit walks 6 paces behind the president. A dark briefcase handcuffed to his arm. A black wire dangling behind his ear. His suit is the shadow of skyscrapers over the projects. His briefcase is the stretched and sewn skins of whole dark families. He looks out through glasses darkened by all he has orders not to see. Inside his case, he carries the long penumbra of our lives, the insomnia of children who have gazed down the bottomless hall of space for the first time, lost between the distant houses of the sky. We who no longer even look up at the night, we know him nonetheless. He is the broker of our confession, the priest of our daily transactions with the earth, the final executioner of our will. We have offered him our children. We have offered him our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, down to the 7th generation. We have sold all the children in return for a wage to live on. We have to put food on the table. The man in the dark suit doesn't even know he is the hunger that lives in our bellies and feeds on fear. He forgets that inside his briefcase, he carries a huge cold silence that stifles everything but the light of the television in so many houses tonight. He looks around from the platform, momentarily mistaking the president's applause for his own. Almost lets a smile get away.
All right, so our panelist today is a group of various teams, women that work in the industry, and what we talk about, debunking the myth of the nuclear industry on the local, state, and federal level. These are some of the panelists that I wanted to be here. We have first Dr. Valerie Thomas to come up. Dr. Thomas. We also have Dr. Ian Miller. And I'll be taking the other seat. We were supposed to have Patty Duran. Patty is on cruise right now and doing the excursion. So when we changed the time, she wasn't able to be here. But I want to make sure that we have the link for her proposal that she actually put in Power Magazine, where she's talking about data centers and the economic impact that it has, like on constituents, but also the community overall. So I'm going to do a brief introduction of our panelists, and then we'll get started. So Dr. Valerie Thomas is a professor at Georgia Tech. He is the Chair of National Systems in the H. Milton School of Industrial and Systems Engineering, with a joint appointment in the Georgia Tech School of Public Policy. Her research is in energy, environmental assessment, and sustainability. Her current research includes evaluation of the potential for hydrogen production in Georgia, food waste reduction, and sustainable aviation fuel for Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Dr. Thomas, thank you for being here, and we look forward to the discussion. Why don't you all give her a hand? And Dr. Ann Miller-Birdsong is a pediatrician and environmental public health specialist in DeKalb County. Dr. Ann graduated from Eastern Virginia Medical School and completed a pediatrics residency, and then earned a master's of public health from Johns Hopkins University. She has worked at the city, county, state, and federal health agencies in areas as diverse as preventable diseases, radiation, environmental health, environmental public health, asthma, a county STI clinic, and a Native American Indian Health Service. Thank you. Then Patty Duran couldn't be here today, but I still wanted to introduce her because she's going to be part of the panel. She's the founder and president of Cool Planet Solutions LLC, which is a consulting company specializing in consumer engagement with energy and grid modernization. She spent the last energy nonprofit called the Smart Energy Consumer Collaborative, which published research and educated people about grid modernization. Patty has also worked at the Sierra Club and Sandy Springs Green Space and volunteered with homeless organizations such as Lost and Found Youth and North Fulton Community Charity. She says a lot about energy inequity, and economics around nuclear energy and the lack thereof when it comes to the ratepayer. But I wanted to point out that she has a blog on Power Mag. We'll make sure that we put it in the chat. But it talks about ratepayers first and the economic case against nuclear and against nuclear small modular reactors, but as well as data centers and the issue around data centers and making sure that we understand that data centers will not solve the climate crisis. So now that I've read all of your wonderful bios, we'll get started, and Dr. Thomas will start with you, and we can talk about some of your work.
Ray, thank you for inviting me here. I'm so happy to be here, and really happy that this is just a few blocks from So you'd like me to talk about data centers, nuclear, and energy. Okay.
But be sure to yell because you're yelling across thousands of miles.
Oh yeah, I can see myself here. So I'm yelling across thousands of miles.
Maybe move the chairs. Move the chairs closer. Yeah.
Oh, that's so hard to do. I'll just say, given the group, I've had enough of a bio intro already. But I'm a physicist, and I have a PhD in physics. And during the time that I was getting my PhD was the time. Some of you are elderly in this room, so you may remember the Pershing and cruise missiles deployed. Yes, so that was up near where I was going to graduate school in upstate New York. So I participated in, see if I can remember. And oh yes, the Women's Encampment for a Future of Peace and Justice. Woo! So it's really cool. I'm saying this, but like women would go compost at this camp. It was very, very radical. We protested the deployment of these missiles and they were eventually put in. And after I finished my schooling, I worked on nuclear arms control. That was my first job. And then we got up to the Gorbachev era, and I happened to later be employed by some people that knew people in the Soviet Union. And so then we were having the start to arms control negotiations. And the big issue was, the sea launch cruise missiles, and U.S. was saying we're not going to have arms control on those sea launch cruise missiles because we wouldn't be able to tell if the Soviets put nuclear weapons on their missiles. It's all kind of a trick because we were putting nuclear warheads on our sea launch cruise missiles for long range and everything. They really wouldn't have it. No, so I got to go on a citizens science project to watch the one and get on one of their missile ships, and we detected the radiation coming from one of their Soviet nuclear weapons. So sorry for all this background, but I'm never going to talk about it. So that was very fun, and indeed, the Soviets didn't know who they were going to have with there, so they made sure they had a really dirty nuclear warhead. So we knew, no matter how stupid we were going to be able to detect it. And so we did. And then the really good thing was that after that, the U.S. decided it didn't want to put nuclear warheads on its sea launch cruise missiles. Unfortunately, for the reason that they really wanted to just use them. And, you know, you don't want people to be worried, is this nuclear or not nuclear coming in? So anyway, the issue went away. The US realized it was in fact stupid to have nuclear work on them. So I did that work for a while and then switched to working on energy and environment, which I haven't since. So I apologize for all of that long-winded anyway. Okay, data centers. Georgia and the nation, perhaps the world, as you may have heard, is there's an avalanche, the wrong word. There are many more data centers being built now than were being built even a few years ago. The number that are being planned and even built is large compared to the number that was even thought about. And these are pretty large. Like some of them are the size in terms of their energy use of a new nuclear power reactor, like Vogtle. So several Vogtles worth of energy being built just in the Atlanta area. You know, never mind all of the other big tech cities around the United States. So, one issue here is why? Why so much? I mean, everybody's using computers, sure. So these AI models are using a lot of power. And in my department where I work, we're experts doing that. So there are people making up these models right there. They're not tuned yet either for just being efficient. You know, you can do efficient computing and then use less power. They're not tuned for that. They're also not yet tuned for what are we even going to be doing with this? Yeah, right now they're kind of for play. It's you know, can we draw a really nice picture with them? So there's a lot of power being used and standing back from it. That's okay. It's a new technology. They're figuring it out. Okay. So there are, as people probably in this room realize, there are a couple of issues. So the data centers might be built next to where you or people we care about live, and they're unattractive. Also, when they're there, then other things can't be there. It was last night I was thinking about this, thinking that we were going to be having a new data center approved just right near us in Atlanta, in Adair Park.
Yeah, we talked about it earlier.
Okay, and now the mayor came out saying that's not a good idea, so that's not happening, and I'm pleased, it's great. So there should be pressure on these major companies to do much better with their business. And in fact, there are companies, I'm not inside any of these companies, and I really don't know, but there are companies that are doing cool things. Like you can run a data center largely, or even I will say entirely on renewable energy. And some companies are setting it up that way, and others not really aren't. These are supposed to be some of the smartest people on the planet, especially on figuring out things like algorithms for how you manage your power system, and the sun is up and the sun is out, and the storage and making hydrogen to store. These people can do that. And I think we should ask them to do that, and we should ask them to be highly energy efficient. Some companies are, and some aren't. The ones that are should really be rewarded. The ones that aren't should be punished. At least by, you know, paying people money that could do better.
So, Dr. Thomas, you'd be surprised to know, or not, that when we advocated against that legislation for the data centers in the city of Atlanta, zoning told us we are only looking at the zoning laws concerning whether or not to grandfather this address back to, or have this address go back to its original zoning to allow the data. We are not looking at environmental or public health impact. And so I wanted to kind of stop you right there because that was a real thing that was told to us. A real thing that was told to us. So Dr. Ann, you know, we want to kind of talk about the public health inequities and what you've seen in your line of work. Okay. Oh, do you want the time? Oh, well,
Are
can
they
you
there?
do without it? Well, probably not.
Okay.
You just like
Yeah.
it.
Heard mostly
Yeah.
about nuclear.
You need it now?
Is that like, you do anything?
Yeah, I think so.
I will look at the slides to know, it's like my notes
Okay,
pulled up here.
okay.
Ask if people can hear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
people can hear.
You all can hear? Okay? Yes, thumbs up?
Uh-oh.
They said in the chat they could hear.
Yes,
There's a-
yeah, okay.
No. Anyway. I think basically we're gonna.
Okay.
Well, I was just gonna do an overview about health impacts of nuclear power from mining all the way to the end and et cetera. So there's involved with nuclear power is not just the power plant, but where it's mined, transport on trucks, the refining of the ore into the rods, transport of those to the power plant and then using them, and then what do we do with it when it's over? And that to me is the biggest thing, is that we don't have a good solution. So with mining, they're down, you know, the miners are down in the uranium mine. There's studies that show a higher incidence of lung cancer and other cancers because uranium itself is radioactive. And then it decays to radon, which is a gas that's also radioactive. So you're breathing this gas in their lungs while the mine's around them, radiating. Anyway, and then also in the towns nearby, when they mine the ore, you know, they have what they call mine tailings, which is the leftovers that's not pure uranium, or not pure enough for them to take out. And they just dump big piles of slag heaps. And some places, they've used it for gravel and not so good, but the towns have these big piles of mine tailings right near the mine, and they still, even though they're not pure enough uranium, they still have some in it. And they're decaying the radon, so there's radon floating around as well as the uranium. Then we get it on trucks, and the trucks hopefully just get where they're going without an accident, but there are times, you could have an accident. I used to participate in drills for whether the warhead had an accident while being shipped from one site to the other. Anyway, what?
Anybody did that.
They plan for accidents like that.
Like they did not want to anyway.
No, it's a whole federal everything, and lots of, there are some local people and wherever, they do it around the country.
So Dr. Ann, I want to stop you right there. How can you help us? How should we communicate to our local government about the impact of data centers, AI facilities, and how we should, you know, advocate
Yeah,
for it?
data centers, yeah, the one thing I'm not sure about, you know, people always wonder about electromagnetic fields. And data centers are a big, huge electromagnetic thing, and I don't know if they're insulated like a coax cable kind of around the outside or what. I haven't heard anybody talking about that, but they do use a lot of power. And for some reason, all the utilities and utility commissions are leaning on nuclear or gas they're familiar with it. But if you look at the coal plants or the nuclear plants, there's like acres and acres of land there. And they could easily put solar with storage. And storage prices have fluctuated. Right now, they're a little higher because of lithium. And the thing with the data center, you know, a lot of it is cryptocurrency and AI, which are really energy intense because they do lots of calculations, like one Bitcoin stream to verify who owns it. It's crazy. The impact is the power use, and they're ugly. They displace. There's no workers there, except maybe one that's making sure the place is cool enough so the computers don't malfunction. And they're ugly. They really displace. There's nothing that community derives benefit once it's built. Then there be some construction jobs while it's being built, but once it's built, there's no benefit. And they really use a lot of power. And, you know, we're smart and build solar cells and wind and use batteries. There's new iron air batteries coming on. Learn that cost a tenth as much as lithium, and they're a lot more environmentally friendly than the way lithium is. We could cover it. We would have it even all night because you just make more than we need during the day and store the rest, and then use the storage at night. It would be perfectly even, but they're just so used to, they want big plants coming.
So, I'm going back to cost, you asked about cost, but on cost, there have been claims that having lots of data centers would reduce electricity costs for everybody. Okay, that's not impossible, but I haven't seen them show it. They should have to show it and stick to it. They're big boxes. They're not toxic. They could go business. You know, there's such a craze now. There's a real risk that you build one and now you've got a box left in your neighborhood and not even where the rooftops were. I think there's what I'll call an opportunity cost. Like in this one, they were talking about in Adair Park. Well, why did they pick that spot? I don't know. But one of them was because there's a really good piece of the electric grid, right? That they wanted to use. Well, that's an asset for the neighborhood. Just think about it. That neighborhood could electrify and have really cool stuff without the cost of building new. So there's also just what could be here other than these. The nuclear is super interesting. I'm getting out of the cost. Nuclear is great. It works. It's not been anywhere near the most cost-effective source of power for ages. And even people say, you know, there are people working on nuclear power to detect that the small nuclear reactors, well, that's how we're going to bring the cost down. That's great. They haven't shown it. They just somehow say, well, we're going to make them smaller and that's going to make them cheaper. Usually things get cheaper when you make them bigger. So it's just unproven. I was tremendously disappointed. I'm not a nuclear advocate, but nevertheless was tremendously disappointed that in the United States in Georgia, we built 2 new power reactors and we couldn't even build them to cost. Way over cost. So, no.
No penalty. They make more money when they do cost overruns, actually.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
kind of
on to it.
so Georgia Power and the company that built it make more money. So why do they want to be my target?
Well, one of the things that we do know is that data centers, AI facilities are growing, and the climate crisis is accelerating. And so nuclear power is being positioned, or the nuclear industry is being positioned as a solution to both. So can you all talk about that? Or, okay, you speak on.
Sure, I'll go and then we'll back.
Yeah.
So, okay, all right. It's true that mostly nuclear power has, really low greenhouse gas emissions. Some because they have to make fuel rods and do all the mining and everything. There are multiple ways to have low carbon electricity. There's solar, there's wind, storage is getting much cheaper. The batteries that you mentioned, the new batteries, and also hydrogen. It actually, if you use it for storage, it's cheap. So nuclear should at least compete fair. The argument for nuclear is, well, it can run at night, and steadily, unlike wind. So it just, it already loses on economic grounds. They're welcome to do a better job, in my opinion.
It does cost a lot to keep operating. It's not like a solar array, you build it, and then there's not much maintenance. At a nuclear plant, you have to keep adjusting and have workers there to check on that temperature and how close the rods are. And every so often you put the new rod in and take the old one out. And the big thing with nuclear to me is there's nowhere to store the spent fuel. And we have most of the power plants in the country have these big concrete steel lined basins. Some are dry and some are wet, but there's all these spent fuel rods, and Yucca Mountain fell through about 15 years ago. We don't have a good solution. And we're generating all this waste, and we don't know what it does, and you have to be careful with it, until it gets the rods too close. It could trigger a more complex reaction. And solar and wind are cheaper, even with batteries. They're very cheap if you don't count the batteries. You have to have the batteries to go all night. It's not, and they're healthier because nuclear, there's some studies that show that there's a suggestion of increased childhood leukemia in people that live within 4 miles of a plant, which is not too many people, but that's why it's a suggestion, because it's hard to get enough people. Leukemia is still a very rare disease, so get enough numbers for it, but, anyway, it's just, and it's expensive. Why spend twice as much money when you can have something that's cleaner and healthier for half the cost?
All right, we broke you up against capitalism.
Well, I mean, there's solar capitalism too, it's just entrenched interests that have a lot of money. It's not really, I guess it's their capital part of capitalism. The people that have been around the longest have lots of money and power. Money's power.
If it's government funded, doesn't that make it communism?
You would think.
You know how much, fossil fuel electricity is usually running the nuclear power plants on a day-to-day basis? Did you hear me, Stan?
No.
Oh, I said how much of the grid, so how much fossil fuel and natural gas, how much coal fire plant electricity, generated electricity is going into the nuclear plant to run it on a daily basis.
Oh, I don't know that. I know in Georgia, our electricity is about 6 or 8% coal. And then about 60 or 80% gas and a little bit of solar. And a little bit of wind.
So, like, I guess, I know we talk about, from the cradle to grave, CO2 and GHG emissions from nuclear being relatively low compared to coal or anything. But considering that it has to also, take from the grid in order to run, overnight and during the day, I'm just curious why those measurements aren't, like, figured into.
I don't know if the
calculation.
nuclear plants use their own electricity or if they're just all feeding into the grid and drawing something else off the grid.
Yeah, they don't
I'm not that up on this. Do you know?
No.
So, yeah,
Yeah, it's not a direct hit, I don't think, but, so I was gonna ask you a question anyway. The desperate risk-taking, of the nuclear industry at this point includes, restarting closed reactors. And what I was gonna put out there was, yeah, data centers seem to be a common excuse, justification. Palisades in Michigan, 3 Mile Island, Unit 1 in Pennsylvania, Wayne Arnold in Iowa. Data centers are in development in the area, so that's an excuse. So is climate mitigation supposedly an excuse. So is jobs. So is, the list goes on. They come up with new excuses all the time. They overlap. One fades, the other one takes the forefront. Data centers are at the forefront right now. But a part of our resistance to the Palisades restart, which I can talk your ears off, how
Where is that? What
desperately
state is that?
Michigan. It's Southwest Michigan, right on Lake Michigan, drinking water supply for Chicago. By some measures, the riskiest atomic reactor in the country, perhaps the world. We can get into details. But the opportunity cost, what I was going to say was, one of our expert witnesses in the resistance to this proposal was Dr. Mark Jacobson of Stanford University. And what a coup to get him on our team. Wally Taylor from Iowa got him on our team. And he has a 2019 analysis that he's incorporated into our resistance. The opportunity costs of new nuclear, let alone trying to revive a dead reactor. And so
Especially if they've been, because the nuclear, the radiation makes the metal brittle. And they have to check every single structure in the reactor.
but they're not. They're just saying it's fine. They're just, that I'm glad you brought up is what makes Palisades perhaps the most risky reactor in the world is the embrittlement of the midline on the reactor pressure vessel. It's so old, it was designed in the mid-60s, it was built from 67 to 71. They got the metallurgy wrong. So the neutrons have embrittled the reactor pressure vessel. Very dangerous. And so now they're just gonna go forward and not address that issue. And so the risks are immense. But the opportunity costs that Dr. Jacobson spelled out in great detail were, okay, if you're waiting for the small modular reactors that they proposed at Palisades, or if you're waiting for the zombification of the old reactor, both of which are going to take years. And the zombification is $8 billion public subsidy. The new reactor is another $8 billion. So $16 billion public subsidy, mostly federal, some state, on a 432-acre site in Southwest Michigan, with extreme safety risks. The opportunity costs would include waiting around and using the grid in the meantime, which is coal and natural gas. So great detail, and I can share it on the bananas list. Great detail, the opportunity costs for climate mitigation of taking this approach. And then the last thing I'll say, talk about capitalism, talk about communism. Friend of ANA, NIRS, Nuclear Information and Resource Service, did an analysis of the Inflation Reduction Act 2022. Biden's greatest accomplishment, right? $383 billion in nuclear power subsidies authorized. More than the climate mitigation aspects of the code, which is 360 some billion. So for an industry that's been heavily subsidized since 1943, truth be told, because it's one industry, weapons and power. So, I don't know, man. Here we go again.
And by the time you get it built, you have 20 more years of CO2 and methane in the air.
Yep.
And if we went to net zero tomorrow, we would stay where we are and still get storms like Helene and Milton. And even if we went to zero tomorrow, it would be 20 years till the methane starts degrading. And another 50, 80, 100 years till the CO2 gets appreciably less. So we're already committed to a lot. And if we wait another 20 years and keep pumping more in, we're gonna be committing ourselves to even more. And it's already so dire. You see what happened, the wildfires out, you know, it's not just California and Oregon, but like 12 states in the West have wildfires every year. And the whole Southeast from Louisiana to North Carolina get horrible hurricanes every summer.
And New Jersey just had fires.
Yeah.
It's not just in the West anymore.
Canada.
Yeah. And there's droughts, and then like Iowa had that derecho, this big huge flood a couple of years ago. You know, our weather's already changing, and that's because of climate change. And we need the fastest way is to put more clean and solar and wind.
I'm curious about these new batteries that you're talking about. Could you explain what the fuel is, the new fuel is for that?
I haven't looked up the chemical reaction. They use iron and air, and basically it rusts and then unrusts. But it's bigger and bulkier and heavier, so it's good for like power plants. It wouldn't work for a car because it's too heavy and too big. But it costs a tenth as much. If you want to Google Form Energy, FORM, they're the ones building it. They have a plant in West Virginia and one just with Wisconsin or Michigan, somewhere in the Midwest. And another one in Colorado and Wyoming.
And is it as efficient as lithium?
Well, it's just a big storage thing, so it can be hooked up to either wind or solar. And the one thing about 5 years ago, I read this article in Clean Techness that was like, the best plan is to overbuild solar and wind, so you build enough solar to power everything during the day on a rainy winter day. And then on a sunny summer day, you have about 80 times as much power as you had, and then you make green hydrogen. And then the green hydrogen can power steel mills and trains and ships that aren't near anywhere that can recharge fast. And there's no, I could go on and on about what pollution from power plants does to people. That's my main area of where I work, so.
I have a question. I'm always curious about arguments, right? There's, the economic arguments, people arguments, land, all the various arguments. But for me, I think what came up around AI, data centers, with how much water and land is used. And so I was curious about your thoughts around potential arguments between the land and water. Right, you made the comment earlier, most of it comment on data centers, I think they do 3 minutes after like the job. But in addition to the fact people are already heard it, I know too, we know there's not going to be enough water. Data centers are literally their own communities that are taking a resource that. Just curious, thoughts on that, or arguments, or anything you see on that information there.
Okay, so one thought I was just beginning to have before you spoke is, yes, we should have a lot of solar, but not just for every possible thing for which anyone could imagine using energy. Because it does take land to build solar. And, you know, I don't know how we think about it. A little bit is fine, or if it's up there, it's fine. But, you know, like I did an analysis of growing, you know, urban farms, right? And so you have unbelievable closed rooms, closed dark rooms in which you're going to grow your vegetable. And then you're going to have artificial lighting and ventilation and all this. Really actually how those fancy lettuces are actually grown. And you would not believe the amount of power, that it takes. That's why they're so expensive. You're buying kilowatt hours. Okay, fine. We're gonna do it with PV. The amount of space you need for the PV is so much bigger than your little compact urban farm. So now you've got to cover the farmland with PV so that you can have your urban agriculture in your little spots. So, you know, you should have, we need to not just do everything that we could possibly think of to use more electricity. There should be some limit. People should be free to do crazy, silly things. You know, have a dance party and it uses a lot of power. But that might not extend to just growing all our food in the dark and then using lights to power it. It just might not extend to a whole lot of cryptocurrency. No, or data centers for making cat movies. Just there should be something else.
But that,
And I'm curious if you have any thoughts about it.
I mean, to me, the point of energy is, and anything we do is to enable people to thrive and live lives that are healthy and well-rounded. And we don't want to just be grunts, working all day, sleeping at night. We want to have beauty and art and music and, you know, do what we enjoy and not just work day and night. And I get back to, when I was in junior high, I read The Lord of the Rings, but at the end, when he comes back to Hobbiton, and they cut down all the trees and built these big factories that built black smoke everywhere, and they kind of looked like, what are we living for? Why are we building all these data centers? Do we really need them? I mean, we need to be out in the world ourselves. For mental health, there's a lot of studies that show that being in nature actually improves your mental health. And we don't need to just have everything be artificial. Your life is good. And energy conservation is one of the fastest way to cut energy use. You just insulate and seal, you know, it's like, as soon as you do it, you got an instant 30%.
And jobs are the ones in for doing that to every building. Yeah.
Hi, I'm not an expert on anything, I'm a generalist. When I was in the Texas legislature, it was my privilege to have Arjun come to Texas, because one of the few really progressive things Texas has ever done is deregulate the industry such that we are really a leader in solar and wind. If you look at all the flat roofs, particularly parking garages, Arjun did a study or presentation to the executive director of Dallas Fort Worth International Airport. We could produce all the electricity needed to run the airport and get most of the vehicles off CNG if we would just build that in as a construction requirement, particularly for public sector venue building. So I could just, I'm going to push back a little bit against either or dichotomy of thinking. I mean, even if you do put solar over agricultural land, the sheep can graze there, tomatoes can be grown there. It's there's so much misinformation on that. I just want to be careful about accepting that either or concept on the use of land.
Yeah, I heard actually someone from Georgia Tech here that talked, and he said, he was talking about the urban heat island, but he said we had trees on the street that shaded 30% of the surface area and photo cells on the roofs that absorbed it, so the roof didn't, it got turned into energy instead of heat on the roof. We could eliminate the urban heat island, that would eliminate a lot of health disparities, because Atlanta is the 14th highest city in the country with temperature difference between the green line and red line areas. Even though that was outlawed 60 years ago, we're still seeing persisting effects. So we did that, we could eliminate the urban heat line and all the temperature disparities. And we would lower the need for using air conditioning, because the air would be cooler. When I first moved to Atlanta over 30 years ago, it would routinely be 66, 68 at night. In the summer, now it's 72, 73 at night. And that's just more concrete and more road.
There is a hand up on, I think Jerry had his hand up,
Oh,
but he took it down.
okay. You can come off mute, Jerry. Do I need one? Where's it? Oh,
Oh, somebody's talking there.
Who's talking?
we can't hear you. You're not on mute.
Yeah,
I don't wanna touch it.
unplug the mic.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna unplug the microphone. Okay, now. Okay.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yes.
But, okay, mine is for an example, I was thinking a lot of others around the country, but, we have a VA hospital here in Art, and it's run totally by, solar. And, all the solar is over the parking lot, so you've got 5 parking lots.
Right.
Everybody, parks in the shade, which is really nice, and they run by solar parks, so they're just an example. And the federal government obviously did this, and they could do that all over, so.
Sounds like a lot of jobs to me.
Yeah.
Yes, I have a question. I'm from Colorado, and we've noticed in the past few years, there's been a major effort, especially by NewScale, but also by some legislators in Colorado, to put SMRs in full transitioning communities. And we've noticed, like, every year, there's more bills introduced in, like, the state legislative session. And we've noticed a pattern of, like, initially they'll introduce some pro-nuclear bills, just like right off the bat, and when those don't pass, they'll like sneak pro-nuclear things into climate bills and try and put, nuclear and especially small modular reactors, they'll just Trojan horse it in, as part of the renewable energy funding packages that are very popular in Colorado. And I'm hearing of similar kind of patterns and similar things happening in other states. And I was just wondering if you all knew of any like coordinated effort to like get small modular reactor legislation introduced at like the state level. And similarly, if there's any like national coordinated effort to like, you know, share intel about what we're seeing happening in the different states and like how to fight those on like a more unified front end.
I don't know. I know in the past, the gas industry,
Can you repeat the question?
oh, the question, yeah, is in Colorado, there's a lot of legislators that are introducing either standalone bills or attachments to climate bills about small modular reactors. And is it a coordinated effort nationwide?
Yes.
Who's coordinated it, and do we have a coordinated effort to fight it? And I don't know, I would look at ALE and any nuclear industry trade group, because I know a lot of the gas ban blocks and things like that were from the Gas Petroleum Association.
What is ALEC?
ALEC is the American Legislative Exchange Council.
I was just gonna say, now you can hear an expert on, it. You're absolutely right. It is funded by the very industries that don't want solar or wind to succeed, i.e. oil and gas and nuclear. And over again, they are growing at a rapid rate. I think we've already got maybe 12 or 15 bills filed in the Texas legislature that are doing essentially what you're talking about, Colorado. And it's all economically driven. In Texas, we had 2 or 3 billionaires that now essentially control the legislature.
And the thing to me is that, I mean, even a small reactor is still gonna take 15, 20 years to build them. We don't have that time with climate. I mean, if you have a closed coal plant and all that land, you could just put solar on it. You've got the transmission lines already, so you don't have to redo all the environmental impacts. The land's right there with the coal plant where maybe they could put, I don't know, I'm not enough of an engineer to know, but I know there's acres and acres of land around nuclear plants. Could they put solar on the edges to enhance the electricity production for the site? You know, it doesn't have.
And wind.
Or wind where there's wind, like, you know, like Oval is down on the near the coast, and there's gonna be enough offshore and onshore wind, like, you might be able to do wind there.
And then you tax it and give everybody in the town a check every month, like I did last. Oh.
Alex does template legislation for everywhere in the country. It's highly capitalistic, it's whatever profits people that they're making or making, including nuclear power. But I said it kind of shorthand, I want to say it again, you asked if it's coordinated around the country, it's coordinated around the world. The United Nations Climate Conference every year, the conference of the parties, and the parties to the UN are nations, not people, not organizations, but nations. They are being encouraged the last couple of years of the COP to work on warming. It is worldwide. Yeah. Even though the COPs sound good, we want to get more green, except they've been held in extremely petroleum heavy nations the last few years. And then they're making fossil fuel deals. But it's going to be in Brazil next year. They're likely. But, and that's because the UN has to travel around. It's not specifically, let's help the fossil fuel have. But part of what the COPs have generated the last few years is push nuclear. It's green.
Right. We
It's not.
don't have anywhere to put this.
No, we don't.
Ian, you put something in the chat. Do you want to speak about it?
Yeah, I just, put a map of the 2012, organized environmental impact statement that, I made comments in and said most of that is in Shoshone Treaty territory. We go from the Strait of River to Pacific, and our treaty is in full force and effect. Our title remains unextinguished, and that's why our, intention at Yucca Mountain for ownership is the only ownership position out of 290 Nevada submitted. They didn't submit any ownership position. But what I'm trying to say is that I already launched those comments, that, this is only in treaty territory. So now it's about time to, pursue litigation against any potential, solar site that violates the treaty, or again, whether it's lithium, the Department of Energy is providing $2.5 billion in financing for the Cracker Power Lithium in Oregon. And then halfway between Reno and Las Vegas is the Silver Peak, Rhyolite Ridge, Pioneer Lithium Boron, which the Department of Energy is providing $700 million in financing to. And if these proposed reactors, other sites, weapons testing, there are ways to utilize the law. So I ask you, how many Indian trees do you have as an American? What are your responsibilities to restrain acts that violate? You have 500 trees, so I'll answer that right now. And this is what I did. They're American trees. They're bilateral trees. And you as Americans have standing to enforce that law for the protection of the peace. I also, at the same time that I submitted those comments in 2012, I would be doing project development on the 2,000-acre panel first solar up to 340 megawatts for the Moab Heights on the Moab Indian Reservation just outside of Las Vegas. And they have 6 solar facilities, utility scale there. And when we shut down the coal-fired power plant because of the radiation, the comments were the tri-planet you're going to increase burden of risk from coal ash, but also contains uranium and just concentrates the coal ash. And it's blowing into the community, blowing into the houses. And the tri-planet there is increased burden of risk
that's how we got the coal-fired power plant shut down. That's been running for 40 years, and this they just spent $100 million in best available retrofit technology. We had it shut down because of the radiation and because of the type of past exposure that created the high capacity for the solar projects that I helped develop for them. And I actually built one of the Arrow Canyon site. I became an electrician and I worked at that site, pulling the cables, plugging in the panels, slinging glass all day at 115 degrees, because that's what it takes. I did that because I need to feel good about my life every day. That's how I feel every day, doing the right thing. That's why I'm involved in working with all you, because this is the right thing to do. In my opinion, is every step of the nuclear chain releases CO2. And the future, we need to change where we're going. And I'm going to help.
Thank you, thank you. While I have, we can hear you okay in Zoom land. Are there any other questions or comments? No? Okay. All right.
I'm sorry, you were saying Zoom post.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but you can go ahead.
So I have a question for both of you, especially you, Dr. Thomas. What would you suggest as ways, the one thing we do at Vermont is we have a nuclear conversation mentality, and just taking into consideration that people who live in the area that work at the plant, there's a good paying jobs in the area, nuclear is there, it's not going anywhere, so how do we work on creating harm reduction policy, and more transparent information about, and they're refueling the plant, so people can shelter and things, stuff like that. In addition to, trying to have an effect on the future or the greater nuclear. My question is, it seems like there are, you see pro-nuclear or anti-nuclear, and there are the range on meetings or whatever. How would you move forward so we're not somehow further exasperating the great divide happening in nuclear right now? How do we use these issues around the nuclear industry to help, create some shared spaces moving forward? Is there language? Is there other people? How, or do we just kind of say, over here doing our own thing, and there are others doing like battle, and everybody's doing that. What is, don't want to be on this? Or is this impossible? I'm really just curious.
All right, so, just on nuclear. One is looking at the cost and the government regulation. I am not suggesting that you suggest less regulation of the fuel cycle, but that it's a big government managed kind of system, and it inherently has. The risks of the whole nuclear fuel cycle are especially for the transportation into making the fuel, the transportation to the site, and then the removal from the site. And so you were talking about exercises for transporting nuclear weapons, but similarly with nuclear fuel, those are more dangerous. They're dangerous to the community. There's no question about it. Again, the cost issue is just so clear. It's a really expensive, kind of uncertain approach to power. I will also bring up that there are efforts to encourage countries that are now not, that don't have nuclear power to adopt nuclear power. Countries can make the choices they want, but no, I think people in countries that are considering adopting nuclear power, building nuclear power plants, I think it's super important for there to be general citizen understanding of the importance of not having an accident, of protecting and managing and having the capacity to manage that. Some of the discussions of developing, small nuclear reactors across sub-Saharan Africa, but, get me to see, it's just, it's very complicated.
And I think too, we need to push back. It's kind of this like conventional wisdom, and if you see an article in the newspaper or hear something on the news or see a social media post, to push back and write a letter to the editor or call into the TV station or on social media, just do a repost and say, this is wrong, it doesn't consider this, and just to keep, so that they know, so that, because the media gets fed conventional wisdom from powers that be, and we need to push back and create the real conventional wisdom of being healthy.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on, let's say.
Yeah, so one I was gonna just share anecdote. So I've lived in Iowa for most of the last decade. A lot of what I was doing before I was at Physicians for Social Responsibility was leading a statewide environmental coalition that was campaigning to close fossil fuel plants. Because Iowa has more than 2/3 wind power and there's lots of land for solar too. And so one of our main partners in a lot of that advocacy was the data center, like big companies. So like Google is a huge partner, Carolyn Dolan, who leads all of their global energy development, Georgia Tech grad this year. And they were great partners in pushing to get off fossil fuels and have clean energy powering all their data centers. And that's why they're developing in Iowa clean energy. Now, obviously, they've decided that they need so much power, they also need nuclear, even though that wasn't really part of our work together. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's, I think there's tension there in terms of how we could work together as allies in certain ways, but also would want to make sure we're emphasizing the right kind of health and safety concerns. I was going to say, I mean, I think, so I hear in terms of sort of myths and arguments, like we hear about the energy demands of AI as a real problem. We hear about the, the health impacts of AI, like the word of the year is brain rot, right? Like these things have health impacts, especially in people who are, living in algorithmic worlds. But there's also, purported benefits, things like, oh, AI can help us develop new battery technologies faster than we could have done before, or can help us solve climate change. And that like SMRs are easier to regulate, they be safer, and they better control the spread of nuclear material worldwide. We're using, like SMRs as opposed to lots of different big technologies. I don't know, I'm just curious how you respond to this sort of like, oh, AI has its benefits, SMR is a better version of nuclear. Like those are things I hear all the time, like you said, they come up in sort of mainstream media.
Yeah, the thing, I think people should have their choice. Like every time I do a Google search now, I get AI at the top.
Right.
And I should have the option to turn it off. There's sometimes I'm just looking for a reference and I don't need AI. And the same thing, with, shoot, what else were you? We just need options and we need clean energy. We don't have time, the AIs are, and the data centers are being built now. And SMR is still gonna be years till it's ready to go. And we could install solar, we could do energy conservation on buildings and other things now to free up energy for the data centers that need it tomorrow. And it would be equitable. We, you know, and as far as climate goes, we just don't have time to build nuclear. It's not gonna solve anything.
Oh,
I'd like to address the issue of those that have the money invested in nuclear power and fossil fuels and coal and how they don't want to change because it's what they've been doing for a long time. And how are we going to address the people who are working for these industries who are afraid that they're going to lose their jobs? And I want to remind everybody that there is still a bill in Congress that's been there now for 30 years called the Nuclear Weapons Abolition and Conversion Act. And what it says is sign on to the TPNW and convert the arms of the nuclear industry. Well, let me read this part of it. Redirection of resources. When the president certifies to Congress that all countries possessing nuclear weapons have begun the verifiable and irreversible elimination of such weapons under the TPNW, the U.S. shall redirect resources that are being used for nuclear weapons programs to be used for purposes related to addressing the climate crisis, including through the development and deployment of clean, renewable energy sources, by converting all nuclear weapons industry processes, plants, and programs for such purposes, and by retraining nuclear industry employees and addressing human and infrastructure needs. So, and it goes on. But if we could just get these industrialists to recognize that the taxpayers would be willing to pay them to transform, not just nuclear industries, but all of the arms industries, to transform these industries, to retool and rebuild and do what is necessary to address real problems, and build solar and wind and geothermal and tidal and whatever kind of energy systems that aren't going to hurt anybody. You know, we just have to figure out a way to let them know that it's in their best interest, that they're not going to lose their companies, they're not going to lose their jobs, they're just going to change them. And instead of feeling scared and bad about what they're doing, they're going to feel good because they're going to change the world. And I've been working on this for a long time, as a lot of you know. And there are more and more people who are actually recognizing the importance of this bill that's in Congress, which is going to be reintroduced again by Eleanor Holmes Norton in DC. She was reelected. She's in her 80s and she keeps on going. God bless her. And there's a group now, there's a coalition now, Back from the Brink. There's folks from Back from the Brink who are part of this, the Warheads to Windmills campaign. And I just want you all to be thinking about maybe plugging into this and getting involved with this and supporting this idea that's already in Congress. It used to be the only piece of legislation calling for nuclear abolition. It's not the only one anymore, thank God. It's a long haul, and this is the group of people that are the best, the most knowledgeable in helping to make it happen.
We've got the Department of Government Efficiency.
Yeah, let's talk Elon. Yeah.
World Beyond Board petition to us to say, this is where the savings can happen, sir. Everybody go sign it. And back in the 80s, I generated an editorial cartoon from the Amarillo Globe Times, back when small papers had cartoonists on staff. To exactly that point, Warheads to Windmills, the Pantex workers should be building windmills. Texas is windy. And it shows it's a 3-panel, a woman burying a warhead, patting it down in the second panel, and the third panel is grown up into windmills, warheads to windmills. Yes, folks, you can keep working, making windmills, not warheads. Economic conversion, there was a New York State Congress member for 13 years straight until he died. He introduced the economic conversion bill that all military, not just nuclear workers, all military people deserve to have their jobs transitioned to good, economically, socially sustaining, safe, and productive work instead of building wars and warheads. And he died and it went away. But back when I started this work, I was pushing economic conversion. No Pantex workers, we don't want to throw you out of work. We want to give you clean, safe work.
Just a couple things, positive and negative on AI. It could also be used to diagnose illnesses and figure out cures. And also it's being used by the military in weapons and maybe nuclear weapons. That was that.
Mhm.
Right, Kevin and.
I just wanted to respond to a second part of Giselle's question, which was the pushback on
Yeah.
small modular reactors and networking. So GreenPod, ANA GreenPod meets once a month, and a part of our discussion each month is SMRs. And in the chat, Lee Ford from Snake River Alliance asked for folks to get in touch with her because I think she chairs the meeting once a month of No Nukes West, which is mostly fighting SMRs. But in addition to that, there's Mike Carberry in Iowa, yet again, who's coordinating a national grassroots resistance movement against SMRs. I think they meet monthly. I think NEARS is part of that, if I'm not mistaken. So there are networks. And then there's, you know, I mentioned Palisades. In addition to the zombie reactor, there's 2 SMRs proposed, and yet more at a sibling site in northern Michigan called Big Rock Point. And so I know across the country there are local battles, and how much we're not too plugged into those national networks. We're just kind of tooth and nail, and but there are networks going on. And I'm not the best expert to ask them because I'm not in them. Actually.
Thanks for your time.
You and then we'll have.
I wanted to speak to what you were, I don't know your name, so what you mean. Okay, thank you. Okay. When you were saying there's the anti-nuclear, there's the pro-nuclear, is there a middle? And I got goosebumps when you said that because I fear for the day when we're trying to find a middle, because then I feel that we would, and I think that the answer, sorry if I get crazy right now, I think the answer is actually informing the pro-nuclear people that nuclear is neither safe nor clean. They know it's expensive, but I learned through the Green Pod that there's more waste per energy unit output of a small modular reactor than there is a large nuclear reactor, so it's creating more waste. And we can say that it gets to be a way that, you know, without a truck turning over, that it's safe, but it's not, because people live in the communities where it went. And I think that is not in the conversation of someone who's pro-nuclear. They also leave out the idea that accidents happen that are not preventable, nor are they cleaned up by the government. So people who live around nuclear sites now are often in communities where people don't have the resources to fight for it. But if we're talking about putting them in every neighborhood in the United States, it's a disaster that's unfathomable. And guaranteed because we have not yet figured out how to control, prevent accidents. Sorry for the stuff, I just had that.
Well,
And there's also the threat of sabotage or terrorists. And, you know, if you have solar, I mean, if you have a nuclear reactor, it can be made to melt down and release radiation, but solar, you can burn up yourself.
Yeah.
And then there's the cost of a nuclear coupling.
Then you have another question or comment?
It's a comment, but
Okay.
I just want to say that I do think it's, I don't disagree with you, but I do think it's like harder to let me focus on sometimes, to take away from a larger struggle around. The fact that it's easy to say, well, there is a higher instance of leukemia on a nuclear plant, but you know, not a lot. It's like, that's how every, like, if you watch some of these documentaries that are going on right now, that's how the DOE folks, and I'm trying to say negative, but I, you know, normally not. Come to a deal, I'm really like, I'm like, not this deal. I want to be clear about that, 'cause I don't think that is helpful. But I do think that we're in a culture of kind of like on the military where you have what's the thing called when it's the casualties, what's the name?
Collateral damage.
Collateral damage. And I feel like that's the culture that's also coming into like the civilian world. And also really what that is that reinforced by racism and like pluralism. And so the fact that anyone in the nuclear industry or outside of the nuclear industry doesn't have full stop about the fact that kids are dying closer or having leukemia and other people around this area that just because they've only proven a certain amount of people having cancer right now. We all know there is so much more to still prove about that. I do think that because we live in a very racist country, that still remains a big problem is this culture of collateral damage, and the collateral damage is going to be people of color, people of low wealth, people in rural areas, kids, like that is normal in my opinion. And I think it's still we're really addressing that as a whole. And one thing as a public policy student, we always hear about wicked problems. Y'all hear about wicked problems? So wicked problems is now everybody. But if you actually read the article, the journal, the authors who wrote and introduced the idea of wicked problems. And now, come on, everybody's using wicked problems now. They said the biggest, and they make this argument throughout their papers. They said the biggest argument is conservatism. This is the biggest wicked problem. And so people floating around these words, they don't really understand what they're part of the problem. And I do think both sides of this issue are a part of the problem with immigration. So I'm just going to be real about that. You don't have to be, you can be against a nuclear reactor, still, not have help of people around you as the highest part of your highest issue. And so I just want to. Okay. Oh, and they're still transferring nuclear warheads. Because they gotta get them fixed up at SRS, with our tritium, that's where they go.
Well, when she mentioned about racism, with Warren, that was one of the issues that came up that, they, deal with poor white folks and black folks in their area, they put in confidence there. And that they, they don't have the knowledge or the wisdom to know how to fight back. And so, that is.
Okay, this week was, working with Jordan Moore, and we thank you for, we moved down a lot, and I don't think what we were trying to say is people are sitting in the middle. I think what you're trying to say is some common ground, because if you're over here saying no, if you're over here saying yes, you're never gonna come to any kind of way that you can consider. It might be a way to vote some way, but if you're always over here and over here, you forget the people that are in the middle. So there are people that are very educated in rural areas and they know nuclear. And you can go talk to them and they're physicists and engineers, but they live in rural areas, they're PhDs and they know, but they choose one side or the other. And I think sometimes when we go in the areas, we just assume that this is somebody that doesn't have a high school education. They don't know anything about this, but they do know a lot about it. So you have to consider the folks when you go into a place, because your idea of what you have might not be what the community says for itself. So you have to consider who you're trying to organize, where you're organizing, and ask the people what they choose. Because everybody has their own free will for what they choose. And you can't take something away without a solution. So yeah, what if this A, B, and C goes away? What's your solution to that? And it can't be something that's theoretical. Like one of the ways we solve some of those problems, like we did job fairs, we did resumes. We went and helped people with their resumes.
your job there. Because you can't say, hey, don't work here, well, where am I gonna work? You know what I'm saying? You have to have a solution to every problem. If you take something away, you have to give people solutions. So it has to be solution-based work that serves the community that these reactions and things are, because there are people that, you know, it is a company, but there are people that live there, you know, every day.
Please.
In Hiroshima, we have a deep belief that we are now living in a war culture and we have to graduate to a peace culture in order to survive. And the fundamental conflict that we are all dealing with is this conflict between the war culture and the peace culture. And right now, the war culture is extremely powerful and dominant. And when I was studying Shorinji Temple over there, I was taught that if you are fighting someone much stronger than you, you have to hit them in a vulnerable place. You have to aim at a pressure point, something that will hurt them and make them leave you alone for a while. And from Hiroshima's point of view, there are two pressure points in the war culture. One is nuclear weapons, because even the people who are making money from nuclear weapons do not want a nuclear war. Everyone doesn't want a nuclear war. So this is one pressure point that we need to be focused on like lasers. The other pressure point is money. Money is the blood of the, competition for money is what the war culture is all about right now. And it is the blood that is circling in the body of the war culture. So money needs to be attacked directly. That means, and also of all the money in the world, the people probably look at our banks and take our money out, run the bank. We could bring the banking system down. And that is one of the things that I really think that the nuclear weapon is focused just because it's vulnerable and we can kill it without having to fight the whole war.
We are going to get our, I really wanted to have the thing, because in energy issues. And one thing, that was good is that we don't want to, consider nuclear at all as an option, right? But I want to have these discussions. This is what we're dealing with right now. You have people that are grassroots, that are organizing, that's working in the community, they know nothing about nuclear, but they're told to vote on an ordinance to allow AI, data centers, small modular reactor plants, building out fossil fuel power plants in their neighborhoods right now. And so coordinated language is important, marketability, how we sell our solutions to the problems. Not looking for, coordinated messaging, but also collaboration on how we do that, because we're being faced with this right now. And these are things, when we talk about economic impact, that's another strategy. So I just kind of wanted to end with that. Thank you so much for sitting all throughout the day. And we will be going to dinner in a second, but want to give Dr. Thomas and Dr. Birdsong a hand clap.
We have an announcement from Giselle.
Yep.
Here and are doing good things. And I just wanted to make a quick announcement. So when we're talking about militarism and, the global destruction of injustice, caused by the military industrial complex, I feel like that conversation isn't complete if we don't also acknowledge what happens in Palestine right now. For over a year now, Gaza has been subjected to a genocidal bombing campaign, a campaign of forced starvation, mass displacement, and it's ongoing. And some of you may remember last few days I came back from a trip to Cairo. I was there for a month doing humanitarian support for people who had evacuated from Gaza and were living in Cairo. And through that work, I connected with two families that are still in Gaza. I connected with their family members that were living in Cairo. And I've been trying to support them through supporting their GoFundMes just to make sure, they have shelter and they have food. And so I've got two GoFundMes here. If anyone is looking for family support, especially as we go into the holiday season, we're eating meals with our families, contributing to make sure families in Gaza can eat as well. And they're really beautiful families. I hear updates from them all the time. The winter is getting worse in Gaza. The food is getting more scarce. Resources are getting more and more expensive and harder and harder to access. So just if anyone feels called to contribute, I've got two families that I know well and trust, and really, really could use the help. And then just as an extra incentive, if anyone's interested, I've been making pieces of art. I've hand painted things and necklaces and different earrings and collage pieces and things. So if anyone is looking for holiday gifts or anything Palestine related, I've got some goodies here, and all the money will just go directly. So I just wanted to make that announcement.
So the plan is to head to the 9 Mile Station for dinner at 6:30 p.m. It's at Ponce City Market, 675 Ponce de Leon Avenue Northeast. And dinner begins at 7. They have a reservation for us, but everybody's paying their own way, just so you're clear. 7 p.m. start time for dinner. Leave here at 6:30. And after that, 8:30 p.m. jazz night at the Burroughs Bar, which is optional, but that's at 505 North Angier Avenue Northeast. So join us if you can. Full day tomorrow, 9 to 10:30 breakfast, which is provided, and then 10:30 start time. And I think we end at 5 tomorrow. It's a little bit shorter day. So, and then just one announcement about the SRS tour that about 19 of us are going on, I think. Glenn Carroll offered to drive her own vehicle. So we canceled the minivan. We're going to fit as many people as we can in the big van and the rest of the folks in Glenn Carroll's car and save a little bit of money for A&A. So that's all I have. See you at dinner.
Question about getting to any from that.
I don't know that we coordinated transport, so folks could get Ubers. I have a vehicle. I need to unload a bunch of stuff from it. I could take some people. There may be some other private cars you can help me, but we haven't coordinated getting to dinner.